Clemson picked up a second straight win over a blue blood while North Carolina's free fall of a season continued.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Tuesday and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host for today, Andy Patton, and you are joining at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. I want to thank all of you for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day, and remind you all that you can check out this show ad-free on Amazon Music, and give a special shout out to those of you who have joined us on the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel. Well, it is Tuesday, so that means we're recapping the big Monday action and getting you ready for a very epic slate of games tonight. Clemson and Houston pick up wins on big Monday over Baylor and North Carolina. We'll talk about those two games. We'll also talk about the fact that 15 of the top 25 teams are in action tonight, including a big one between Tennessee and Kentucky, and another great game between Purdue and Michigan, plus some bubbly games taking place in the Big 12 and the ACC. We'll get to that to close out the show. Well, we're actually starting our show with the first game of Big Monday. The last few weeks we've been opening with the second game, the Big 12 game, which has typically been the better game. And in this case, I suppose it was the better game. Neither of these were particularly close matchups. Technically, Houston's win over Baylor was by a much closer score, but it was a 20-point game for most of the second half, just like it was between Clemson and North Carolina. But we'll start there because Clemson, who just snuck in back into the AP Top 25. They're 23rd after the poll came out because of their big win over Duke on Saturday. They turn around 2 days later and throttle North Carolina at Littlejohn, 85-65 the final. And folks, it didn't even feel like it was really that close. This was a blowout through and through. Clemson was up double digits, I think by like the 7 or 8 minute mark left in the first half, and it never really got any closer than that. The Tigers now up to 12-2 in ACC play, 20-5 overall in their 20-win season for Coach Brad Brownell. And like we said, beat the two blue bloods, Duke and North Carolina, in a 3-day span. That is a tremendous feather in the cap for what has been a fantastic season for the Tigers this year. Yes, we're going to talk about it. It is not as impressive to beat North Carolina this year. Feels like everybody's doing it, but still, anytime that a team in the ACC can pick up wins over Duke and North Carolina back-to-back, you feel pretty good about it, even if Carolina clearly having a down year. Victor Lakhin, incredible performance from him. He had 20 of his 22 in the first half, finished this game with 6 rebounds and 4 blocks. He was 9 of 16 from the field, just absolutely taking North Carolina's bigs to the woodshed all game long. He also was 4 of 5 from 3. He could hit the outside shots, pull them away from the rim, but he was just he was feasting, down on the block early in this game. Like we said, 20 of his 22 in the first half. And Clemson did what so many others have been able to do effectively against this North Carolina team. They just cleaned house on the glass. 41-28 was the rebounding advantage for the Tigers. They had 15 offensive rebounds, way too many second chance opportunities. When you're constantly getting offensive boards, when it's easy to score around the rim, you're going to win a lot of basketball games. When you do that, and you also shoot 48% from 3, 12 of 25 for the Tigers, you're going to win pretty much every basketball game that you play. And that was the case here as Clemson, as we said, rolled to a pretty easy victory here. Next up for the Tigers, they're at Florida State, at SMU, host Notre Dame, and then at Virginia. Looking like a real chance for Clemson to continue to build on their already stellar record here. Wouldn't be surprised if they're 4-0 in this stretch, 16-2 in conference play after the next couple of weeks. Meanwhile, for North Carolina, they dropped to 7-6 in the ACC, 14-11 overall. They've now lost 3 of their last 4. They've lost 5 of their last 7. And folks, 5 of their last 7 were losses. The wins were an overtime win over Boston College and a 1-point win over a floundering, flailing Pitt team. It has been rough sledding for Hubert Davis and the Tar Heels really all season long, really since the win over UCLA in late December. It has been a really, really rough stretch for this team. They're 4 of 19 from three in this game, folks. They were 5 of 11 from the free throw line. Ian Jackson went a second straight game without a single field goal. He is in a massive freshman slump for him. He was 3 points in this game, all from the free throw line. He was 0 of 8 from the field, including 0 of 3 from three. And this team is just in a complete free fall right now. The lack of size, we saw it as an issue coming into the season. They were unable to land some of the targets that they were pursuing in the transfer portal, ended up going with Van Allen Lubin, ended up having Jalen Washington fill a bigger role. Tejan Claude played a little bit in this game, but they just do not have the size to compete at this level. The backcourt is very small. Elliot Cadeau had a rough game, 6 turnovers for him in this one. RJ Davis played pretty good, but there's just, you can feel this team, the energy is not there. There's not a lot of people celebrating on the bench. Like, you can just feel that this team is kind of sees that the season is already in a spot where it's kind of circling the drain. And it just felt like a very listless, going through the motions type performance for this North Carolina team. At this point, it's really hard to imagine an NCAA tournament bid. We've seen places continue to label them as being a bubble team. I don't see how, if you take the name off the team here, looking at the resume, it's not there. They were 46th at the net coming into the game. As I'm recording this late on Monday evening, we don't have the updated net rankings, but they're going to be lower than that. They are 1-10. 1-10 in quad 1 games. They don't have any quad 2 losses, but they have a quad 3 loss to Stanford. 1-10 in quad 1 games, and a quad 3 loss is it's disqualifying. I mean, there's just no way at this point. Yeah, they got another game against Duke. That helps if they win it, but they sure don't look like a team capable of winning that game right now. For them next, at Syracuse, hosting NC State, hosting Virginia, at Florida State. You win all 4 of those, maybe we revisit the conversation. But I'll tell you what, if you lose any of them, that conversation is completely done and dusted for the North Carolina Tar Heels this year. Second game of Big Monday, Houston cruises past Baylor. Final score was only an 11-point margin, 76-65 for the 6th-ranked Cougs, but it was a bigger margin throughout most of the second half of this game. Baylor kind of crawled back a little bit towards the end. Cougs moved to 12-1 in the Big 12, 20-4 overall. Arizona is 11-1 in the Big 12, and they are playing at Kansas State tonight. We'll talk more about that game later in the show, but if they win that game, that sets up a battle of the two 12-1 first-place Big 12 teams playing each other on Saturday in Tucson. So if Arizona wins tonight, really, really, really fun battle brewing in Tucson on Saturday between these two teams. Baylor, meanwhile, falls to 15-9 overall. They're now just 7-6 in the Big 12. And interestingly, both these teams were lights out. Baylor's a good offensive team. Houston's an efficient offensive team. But for anybody to shoot as well as Baylor did against Houston and still lose is pretty impressive. Baylor 58% from the field, 60% from three, 9 of 15 from the three-point line. Again, 58% from the field, but Houston was 51%. Houston was 42% from three, 10 of 24. The main difference, Baylor had 15 turnovers. Houston had just 7. Also, Houston had 9 offensive rebounds. Baylor had just 4. When you don't give yourself opportunities for second chance points, when you keep coughing up the basketball, VJ Edgecombe had 5 turnovers. When you're turning over the ball, when you're not giving yourself those opportunities, it almost doesn't matter how well you shoot, especially if the other team is shooting super efficiently as well. And that's what Houston was able to do. Very balanced scoring effort from the Cougs in this one. 5 players in double figures. LJ Cryer had 14. Uzan had 12 and 6 assists. Terrence Arsenault came off the bench to have 11. Juwan Roberts and Emmanuel Sharp had 10 as well. Meanwhile, for Baylor, Norchad Omier, great game for him. We said he needed to have a great game for Baylor to have a chance in this game. He did, and it still didn't really give them much of a chance. 19-5, 8 of 9 from the field. He knocked down a 3-point attempt as well. Meanwhile, VJ Edgecombe, perfect from the field, 5 of 5. He was also 4 of 4 from the free throw line, had 14 and 6, along with 3 assists and 2 steals. But like we said, he did have those 5 turnovers, which was a big issue for the Bears. They host West Virginia on Saturday, looking to get back in the win column. Every time we've done a Big Monday segment, there's always been at least one other game. Basically, every Monday, it seems like, has 3 good games, the 2 on Big Monday, and then something else. Wasn't really a great game. We had a Mountain West matchup between Nevada and Fresno State just wrapped up as I'm recording. Nevada just destroyed Fresno State, 94-69 the final. Nevada now 6-7 in the Mountain West. Fresno State 1-13. This team is going to be in a rough shape when they get into the Pac-12 a year plus from now, when they join the Pac-12 with San Diego State, Boise State, Gonzaga, and others. Well, folks, 15 of college basketball's 25 ranked teams are in action tonight, including a top 15 battle in Lexington and a battle for Big Ten supremacy in Ann Arbor. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, folks, after the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, WayFair has everything you need, all within your budget. I'm currently looking for furniture, and WayFair's huge selection makes it easy to find pieces that fit my style and my budget. And my favorite part is the free and hassle-free delivery, even for larger items. Wayfair's site was so easy to navigate, and I found everything that I needed in no time. There's something for every style and every home, so no matter your space or your budget. So give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's wayfair.com. Every style, every home. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton here, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast, moving away from recapping the big Monday action with wins by Clemson and Houston to instead get you ready for a very great slate of games on Tuesday. Like we said, 15 of the top 25 teams are in action on Tuesday. We're going to talk SEC and Big Ten. We got 9 games between those two conferences to talk about here in the second segment. Then we'll talk some Big 12, Big East, one ACC game, and a couple of mid-major games, all with some bubbly implications to close out the show. We'll start in the SEC, where we got our 5 matchups, starting with Auburn, the number 1 ranked Tigers. They stayed number 1. Isaac and I talked about it a lot on Monday's episode. We believed Auburn deserved to stay the number 1 team, even after losing to Florida. They did, in fact, stay number 1. Now they got another road game here at Vanderbilt, 7 Eastern time on the SEC Network. FanDuel favoring the Tigers by 9.5. Main question, can this team rebound from that loss? Vanderbilt has played has upset teams before. They've played spoiler. This is a decently dangerous Vanderbilt team. Auburn is the better team. They should win, but you want to see how a team responds to a loss, and Auburn hasn't really had to do that much this year. Speaking of Florida, the 3rd-ranked Gators at number 22, Mississippi State, one of our 3 unranked matchups on Tuesday, 7 Eastern time as well for this one. ESPN2, FanDuel favoring the Gators, the road team, by 2.5. Elijah Martin is expected to return for Florida, so that is a big storyline to watch in this game. This Mississippi State team has been struggling a little bit as of late. Florida obviously been rolling, so it'll be really fun to see how this matchup shakes out going on in Starksville. Other ranked-unranked SEC matchup, number 5, Tennessee at number 15, Kentucky, also on 7 Eastern time, folks. If you don't have YouTube TV, now is the time to get it, to get your 4 different screens. 3 really, really good SEC basketball games. The Purdue-Michigan game also at 7 Eastern time. There's going to be a lot of great games going on at that time. This Tennessee-Kentucky game will be on ESPN, FanDuel favoring the Vols to head into Lexington and pick up a victory. They're favored by 1.5. Lamont Butler back for the Cats. That is the huge storyline. He came back for them in their game against South Carolina over the weekend. Really, really good timing for Kentucky. They're a not great defensive team. Lamont Butler is arguably their best defensive player, and he is now back in the mix in time for a matchup against the very, very difficult to defend Zakai Ziegler and his high-level playmaking, high-level shooting that he brings to that Vols team. Still no timetable for Kerr Kriisa to return for Kentucky, but having Lamont Butler definitely gives the Wildcats a better chance of winning this game, but their defense is going to have their hands full with Ziegler and with Chaz Lanier, who's been up and down, but when he's on, this Tennessee team, very, very tough to beat. It'll be fun to see how Rick Barnes attempts to slow down Mark Pope's offense as well. 2 more games in the SEC. Number 2, Alabama at Texas, 9 Eastern time on ESPN. This will be after the Tennessee-Kentucky game. Bama favored by 4.5. The number 2 team in the country going on the road to an unranked Texas team, only favored by 4.5. That is how deep the SEC is. However, I think Bama wins. I think Bama covers. I'm not super sold on this Texas team. We've been a bit of critical of Texas, particularly their lack of depth throughout the season. As I'm recording this, I don't know an update on Kendall Weaver, but we've seen this team I like the talent on this team, especially in the starting five, but I think Alabama's got enough depth. I think they have enough offense to be able to go get a W here and to take down the Longhorns at the Moody Center by perhaps something closer to 10 than 5, as the spread indicates. Georgia going on the road at number 8, Texas A&M, 9 Eastern time for this one on the SEC Network. FanDuel favoring A&M by 7.5. They're a little bit of a difficult team to pin down, A&M. You see them playing some great ball. Sometimes they struggle. This Georgia team certainly good enough to pull an upset here, but I like A&M to win this one on the road. Although that's 7.5 point spread, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little closer than that. Looking over at the Big Ten, number 7 ranked Purdue Boilermakers going on the road to Michigan, to Ann Arbor to take on Dusty May and the Wolverines, who are ranked number 20. So it's a matchup of top 20 teams. This game, like I said, also 7 Eastern time on Peacock. FanDuel favoring Michigan, the lower ranked team, but of course the home team, by 2.5 points. A chance for Michigan to move into first place in the Big Ten if they win this one and Michigan State loses their game. The big matchup will be in the front court in this one, obviously, with respect and apologies to the Lawyer family and, of course, to Braden Smith. What intrigues me the most about this matchup is how Trey Kaufman-Renn handles the assignment defensively against Danny Wolf and or Vlad Golden. Probably Vlad Golden would be my guess, and how Michigan attempts to slow down Trey Kaufman-Renn, who's been a monster for this Purdue team. Not getting enough love. I realized he was not on when the Karl Malone Award list came out for the best power forward in college basketball, and he wasn't on it. I thought, well, he'll for sure be on the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award watch list. He was not on that watch list either. That feels like a misstep by somebody, by the voting population here, to not have Trey Kaufman-Renn at one of those spots. He's been a phenomenal player this year. So too have both Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf. But I think that how that matchup shakes out is going to have a lot to say about how this game goes and whether Michigan can get into first place or whether Purdue continues to be the team to beat in the Big Ten, even in the post-Zach Edey era. Other Big Ten games, Indiana, Mike Woodson's club for now, going on the road to East Lansing to take on the 18th ranked Spartans of Michigan State. 9 Eastern time on Peacock for this one. FanDuel favoring the Spartans by 11.5. Kind of interesting to always see how a team responds. Obviously for Indiana, they got off to a slow start against Michigan, but actually valiantly fought back and only lost that game to the Wolverines by 3. Can they go on the road again, pick up or on the road, their first road trip after Mike Woodson's announcement that he is stepping down at the end of the year? Obviously, this is a very, very good Tom Izzo-led Spartans team, but I'm intrigued. I think Michigan State wins. I think they win regardless, but I would like to see if Indiana's got some fight in them, if they can maybe kind of start to look like they might turn the end of this season around and rally around their coach or not. Either way, again, Michigan State's the better team, and they're probably going to win out, but it'll be something to keep an eye on Tuesday night. UCLA going out to Illinois to take on Brad Underwood and the Illini. 8 Eastern time on Peacock for this one. FanDuel favoring the Illini by 5.5. UCLA been very good as of late. Illinois coming off a big win themselves. They're back at full strength, so it'll be interesting to see how these two teams shake out. And then you got Northwestern going out to Eugene to take on the Ducks of Oregon at 11 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network. FanDuel favoring the Ducks in that one by 8.5. Dana Altman's team, one of the more interesting resumes in college basketball. They have, I think, the second most, or tied for the second most quad one wins, but they're, I think, 5-8 or 6-8, 5-8, something like that in the Big Ten. Really strange season for the Ducks. Win a lot of good games, but lose a lot of not so good games. Northwestern, obviously, a team they should beat, especially at home, especially with Northwestern having to play a game at 11 Eastern time for them. But definitely one to keep an eye on for this Ducks team. We'll see how they look against this Wildcats squad. Well, folks, there's a battle of the Big Ten Wildcats going on in Little Manhattan tonight, plus an extremely fun game in the Big East between UConn and Creighton in Omaha. We'll get to those games and a few others to close out the show coming up in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast, still prepping y'all for a fantastic slate of games Tuesday night. We talked SEC, 5 games in that conference, 4 games in the Big Ten. Now we're talking about 4 games in the Big 12 as well. Starting with number 10, Iowa State, the Cyclones going out to Central Florida, 7 Eastern time again. Gotta have YouTube TV, lots of games to watch. This game, though, being on ESPN Plus. FanDuel favoring the Cyclones by 7.5. Milan Momcilovic returned for this team in a 30-point walloping of TCU over the weekend. Now it's time to see if TJ Altsberger's team can go on a little run. The Central Florida team is reeling right now. I think they've lost 4 or 5 straight for Johnny Dawkins' club. So Iowa State is a great opportunity to pick up another win, to get some momentum going into the rest of the season, to start to get Momcilovic back to full strength, get his game legs under him with a relatively easy slate of games coming up for the Cyclones. Arizona State, 13th ranked Tommy Lloyd's Wildcats playing the other Wildcats, Jerome Tang and Kansas State at 8 Eastern time on ESPN+. FanDuel favoring Arizona to go on the road and win this one by 3.5. But Kansas State's one of the hottest teams in college basketball. They had that 20-plus point win over Iowa State. They just beat Kansas. This team is rolling right now, and there's nothing more that Jerome Tang's club would want to do than knock off Arizona, pick up a big-time home win, and put it in a position where Houston is the sole possession of first place. They are right now as we're recording this, but if Arizona wins, both teams 12-1 going into that matchup on Saturday, Arizona cannot look ahead of Jerome Tang's team, especially the way they've been playing as of late with Doug McDaniel. We've seen Coleman Hawkins start to come around a little bit. Arizona has been very good as of late, but this is not the kind of game you can afford to not give your full 100% strength to. And so it'll be a fun one to see if they can avoid the trap here heading into that weekend game against Houston. Colorado going to Fog Allen Fieldhouse to take on the 17th ranked Jayhawks of Kansas at 9 Eastern time. This game on ESPN2. FanDuel favoring the Jayhawks by 17.5. And why wouldn't they be? Why wouldn't they be? Colorado has not won a game in the Big 12. This is not a good Colorado club. They're just not good. They are the worst team in the Big 12. It is not particularly close. This is a home game for Kansas. They should win. They should win by 17-plus points. They should cover this spread. Kansas has not done things that they should do multiple times this year. I would be shocked, stunned, appalled if they lost this game. Wouldn't be as surprised if they don't cover, especially since Colorado just played a 10-point game against Houston earlier in the week, I believe on Saturday. But this is an opportunity for Kansas to get right in a game that they pretty desperately need for Bill Self's team. And then our last game in the Big 12, not featuring a ranked team, but this is a bubbly game of sorts. BYU, the Cougars, going out to Morgantown to take on the West Virginia Mountaineers, 7 Eastern time again. This one on the CBS Sports Network, FanDuel favoring the home team, West Virginia, by 1.5. West Virginia's been struggling lately. Both these teams are about 500 in conference play. Both of them are in that bubble conversation. For West Virginia, the injury to Tucker DeVries has really hurt them, but I'm very excited about a matchup of two very talented but very different guards in Igor Demine for BYU and Javon Small for West Virginia. Should be fun to see how that one shakes out in Morgantown tonight. Couple Big East games to get to, and then we got a few more, one in the ACC, 3 out of the mid-major ranks before we get you on with your day. In the Big East, DePaul going on the road at the Fiserv Forum to take on Marquette, 18th ranked Golden Eagles, 8:30 Eastern time on Peacock. Marquette favored. This is the biggest line of all the games we have on here tonight, 18.5 points. Favorites for Shaka Smart's team. Marquette, kind of like Kansas, they need a get-right game. This is the best get-right game that you get in the Big East. Maybe Seton Hall, which apologies to Sheen all the way, but they are not a good team this year. Unfortunately, I've liked some of what we've seen from Chris Holtmann and DePaul, and I think that they're a team that is moving in the right direction, but they kind of had nowhere to go but up. But having said that, I don't think they present much of a challenge to Marquette. I think this is a good opportunity for Shaka and his club to get a comfortable win and start to figure out some of the things that have been an issue for them over the last few weeks. The big daddy in the Big East, though, absolutely taking place in Omaha, Nebraska. UConn, Danny Hurley and the back-to-back national champions going to Creighton. This is a matchup where Creighton is the ranked team. UConn is not. They just missed being in the top 25 for this week. Creighton snuck in at number 24. This game at 9 Eastern time on the CBS Sports Network. Creighton favored by 3.5. What a fun game. What a fun game this will be. UConn does not have Donovan Clingan anymore. They do not have the imposing rim presence that they've had in the past. And they're going up against one of the most dominant centers in college basketball in Ryan Kalkbrenner, who is phenomenal on both sides of the basketball. He is the catalyst. He is the hinge. He is the player that will determine whether Creighton gets another massive win, stays in the top 25, whether UConn goes out and gets a road W, gets themselves likely back into the top 25, likely replacing Creighton in the top 25. This game's going to come down so much to Ryan Kalkbrenner. Obviously, you need Stephen Ashworth to have a good game for the Blue Jays. For UConn, you need your studs to step up. We've seen Solo Ball step up. We've seen Alex Caravan step up, Liam McNeely, but you need all of them. You can't just have who's going to be the guy tonight, who's going to be you need multiple guys to really step up to get this thing done. You need Samson Johnson to have a phenomenal game on both sides of the ball. You need Terrace Reed, and you need those guys to avoid foul trouble, which is tough to do against Kalkbrenner. There's a lot of intrigue in this game. I'll tell you right now, this is the one that I have circled that I'm really excited to watch tonight between these two teams. In the ACC, we got one bubbly game going on. Pitt at SMU, 9 Eastern time on the ACC network. FanDuel favoring the Mustangs by 4.5. This game is bubbly because of SMU. Pitt not really on the bubble anymore. I mean, if they win this game and they keep winning, maybe they get back into the bubble conversation, but this team has been in free fall for a while. They've really struggled since that loss to Duke back in early January when Cooper Flagg had that big time dunk that was kind of his welcome to the season moment for him. Pitt's been in a big free fall since then. At this point, without a lot of marquee matchups in the ACC, it's kind of hard to get yourself back into the bubble conversation. SMU's still floating around there. If you lose to Pitt in this game, I think you push yourself off the bubble and you're going to, again, have a hard time climbing back in. But if you're SMU, if you win this game against this Pitt team, you put yourself in a position where you're still in that conversation with a couple weeks left to go before you get into the ACC tournament. 3 mid-major games, mostly of the bubble variety. First in the A10, George Mason going on the road to face Josh Schertz, Robbie Avila, and St. Louis. The Billikens, 8 Eastern time on ESPN Plus for this one. FanDuel favoring SLU by 1.5 points. But George Mason, they're 10-1 in the Atlantic 10. They played some great basketball this year, kind of snuck up on people. Everybody's like, oh, it's Dayton, it's VCU, it's St. Louis. And yet George Mason, here they are, 10-1 in the conference. SLU 7-4. But they are a dangerous team, obviously, with Avila healthy, with Josh Schertz been a phenomenal coach for this team. Very excited to see how this one shakes out. I think George Mason has a chance to get a road win, move to 11-1, and really start to make a name for themselves as the season goes on. A couple other late ones going on. One in the Mountain West, Colorado State, the Rams at Utah State. This game at 11 Eastern time on FS1. FanDuel favoring the Aggies of Utah State, the home team, by 6.5. Colorado State's 9-3 in conference play. Utah State is 11-2. These two teams are both squarely on the bubble. Utah State, by most accounts, is on the correct side of the bubble. Colorado State, by most accounts, is not. You go get a road win over the 11-2 team in conference play, that puts you probably much, much closer to being on the right side of that bubble, if not bumping you all the way into that conversation for Nico Medved and the Rams. Nick Clifford, the player to watch in this one, he is phenomenal talent for Colorado State. Really excited to see how this one shakes out. And future Pac-12 foes, both these teams making the move to the Pac-12, not this upcoming season, but the season after that, along with their fellow Mountain West teams, San Diego State and Boise State and Fresno State, and then, of course, Gonzaga and whoever else ends up joining the conference, as we still await to see what happens there. But this is going to be a fun one taking place in Utah tonight. And then last but not least, another bubbly game. Santa Clara going on the road at St. Mary's. West Coast Conference action, 11 Eastern time on ESPN2. FanDuel favoring the Gales here by 9.5. St. Mary's lost to San Francisco. They were undefeated, one of the few undefeated teams remaining in their conference in all of college basketball. May have snuck into the top 25 this week, or at least been very close to it, had they not lost that game to the Dons. But now they lose to the Dons, gives San Francisco a chance to clip St. Mary's in conference play, gives Gonzaga a chance to clip both of them in conference play. Santa Clara is a little bit further back from those two teams, but they are very dangerous. They have a win over Gonzaga already. They have a win over San Francisco already. They'd love to pick up a win over St. Mary's. Tough to go into Moraga and get a W. Tough ask for Santa Clara, but with Adama Alpha-Ball, who's been playing some great basketball as of late. Elijah Mahi, who they added this offseason, who's been fantastic. Carlos Stewart, transfer that they got back from LSU. He transferred to LSU last year and came back for Herb Sendek's team. This is a very good Santa Clara team, and if they are able to not slow down St. Mary's, I should say, if they're able to get them out of their rhythm offensively, which Gonzaga did effectively by playing a zone, if Santa Clara can do that, can disrupt St. Mary's a little bit, can get red hot from beyond the arc, which we've seen them do, this could be another upset for the Gales. This could be a chance for either San Francisco or Gonzaga to really potentially take over in the West Coast Conference. This is going to be a really fun late night game if you're somebody who is a night owl, who stays up late. Even if you're not, maybe have a second cup of coffee, because this is going to be a real fun one again on ESPN2 starting at 11 Eastern time tonight. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family like we did earlier. Let's go Wild Popes, their big game against Tennessee. Cheers to the Bruins going out to Illinois. And until Wednesday when Leaf and Isaac recap all of this fantastic action, peace out.